With just days to go before the end of the term, the United States Supreme Court handed down 2 rulings this morning, and then inadvertently they gave us a sneak peek into a third. Earlier today, reporters at Bloomberg Law got access to an accidentally posted copy of what appears to be the court's decision on a very consequential abortion case. According to Bloomberg, the court is poised to allow pregnant women in Idaho to receive abortions in medical emergencies. Now, on its face, this sounds like a good decision. But the decision here appears to be based on a technicality, effectively, rather than the actual merits of the case. The justices did not decide whether state-level abortion bans can be overridden by federal law requiring doctors to provide medical interventions, including abortions, in emergency situations. In other words, whether doctors are allowed to perform emergency abortions if medically necessary. And that is very much a live issue in 5 other states where abortion is almost completely banned. As Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson made very clear in her opinion, the ruling is not a victory for pregnant patients in Ohio. It is a delay. While this court dawdles and the country waits, pregnant people experiencing emergency medical conditions remain in a precarious position as their doctors are kept in the dark about what the law requires. Joining me now is Irin Carmon, senior correspondent at New York Magazine and author of the forthcoming book, Unbearable: Being Pregnant in America. Irin, thank you for joining me. You understand the complexities of these issues better than most. But just first, the veracity of what we saw today, does it smack of the actual decision as you read it? And Ketanji Brown Jackson is not mincing words about how upset she is.
So many fascinating dynamics to break down here. The first thing is that the court did say that a decision or that a text of a decision was uploaded. We know it's a legitimate document. We don't know if it's a final document. It's funny how we're getting to peer back behind the curtain so many times, and the court looks like a hot mess almost every single time that happens. It could have just been an error. That seems like the likeliest reason. It certainly reads like every single justice says themselves. There's a small chance that it was yanked because perhaps an outcome of a vote has changed. I doubt it. We'll find out tomorrow morning, perhaps the next day when their decision's scheduled.
What of the Ketanji Brown Jackson's contention that this is an appalling waste of court time? Effectively, I'll read part of her dissent. We can't simply wind back the clock to how things were before the court injected itself into this matter with the Dobbs ruling. It is too little, too late for the court to take a mulligan and just tell the lower courts to carry on as if none of this happened, basically rescinding the petition for cert. As the old adage goes, the court has made its bed, so now it must lie in it. I mean, these are forceful words from the newest member of the court, and she seems quite clearly upset about how this has been handled.
This is very powerful coming from Justice Jackson, especially because in some ways she's calling out another new member of the court, Amy Coney Barrett, who describes herself as having changed her mind about taking the case. So just big picture, something before we step back and all the different opinions, what they mean here. What's at stake here is that for the longest time on planet right-wing fantasy, there is no emergency abortion that is justified. And if there is, we're not going to call it an abortion.
Right.
That is the planet that they've been living on. 2 years ago, that was put into practice. The reality had to intercede that, in fact, there's plenty of reasons why somebody might have to go to an emergency room and need abortion care. And so their answer in the beginning was always, oh, no, somebody's misinterpreting the law. Now we've gotten to the stage that their lawyers are in court and saying, well, not that, well, maybe that. Well, that doesn't really happen that way. Or if it does, it's the doctor's fault trying to make us look bad. But they've also been forced to say that they are, in fact, waiting for somebody's organs to fail, waiting for somebody to die, and that they don't care if they suffer a serious impairment, which is the federal standard, right? So that's the backdrop, that every other week somebody is being medevaced. A pregnant woman is being medevaced in Idaho, and women are being told that they're considering getting pregnant in Idaho that they should preemptively buy a membership to a medevac company. And so
life flights out of the state in case you get pregnant.
I mean, there aren't even that many people in Idaho, and yet there's somebody every other week who needs this care, at least, that we know of, that goes to the hospital. So the backdrop is, though, that the court jumped in on this so fast before the lower courts even had a chance to fully explore the issue, because they agree, they took at face value Idaho's argument that the federal government was going to force them to suffer irreparable harm by enforcing this emergency law. And so in order to dismiss it the way they did, they needed at least one justice to change their mind, because it takes 4 justices to take it. In the end, we ended up with a 3-3-3 opinion. Okay, we had the 3 female Democratic appointees. We had 3 quote unquote moderates.
I would put that in heavy air quotes.
You know what? We had 3 Republican politicians, Kavanaugh, Barrett, and Roberts. Who I think need to be understood as they would rather wait for the Trump Justice Department to resolve this than blow up this issue before the election.
They see what's happened to the country in the process in the wake of Dobbs.
They saw 2022. And then, you have the true believers, Gorsuch, Alito, and Thomas, who just wanted to burn the whole thing down. And so within the liberals, you have Ketanji Brown Jackson saying, not only are we going to don't bother with this fake justification of the procedure to say, oh, well, we shouldn't have taken it, so we don't have to decide it, we'll wait. Because she knows that there's a lot of other states that are having to
that's the thing. There is a case in Texas that's the mirror image of this that is almost certainly going to go to the court.
Right, and she's saying that. She's saying, don't make these women in other states wait. Okay, so Idaho, but what about Texas, where there's another case waiting in the wings? We saw the same thing happen with the Mifepristone case. Great, for now, access is preserved. But what about all these other cases that are coming? Are they just punting it because they know how bad, and by they I mean the Republican appointees, some of them, are they punting it because they would rather that this issue not blow up in their face? Guess what? There's a debate tomorrow. Guess what? There's an election in November when the Trump Justice Department or potential future Trump appointees could do their dirty work in the future.
Or the Comstock Act can take care of the work that they don't want to do. I mean, the political calculation that is at the root of that is just damning for the court if that's actually what's happening. It is a remarkably cynical view about the high court, but it's hard to imagine having any other assessment of what's actually happening. Erin Carmone, a wealth of knowledge on this. Thank you for your time, my friend.
Thank you.
Former Trump advisor Steve Bannon is just days away from the start of a 4-month prison sentence for contempt of Congress. That is, unless the Supreme Court agrees to Bannon's last-ditch request to remain free while he appeals his conviction. Today, the Justice Department urged the High Court to deny that request. But for a man who could possibly be reporting to prison this Monday, Steve Bannon appears sort of unfazed. In a new interview, he tells Time magazine reporter Eric Cortellessa, "I don't fear this at all. I'm a political prisoner." Cortellessa writes that Bannon is attempting to rally an audience he calls an army of the awakened to sustain his anti-establishment crusade. By playing the martyr, Bannon hopes to elevate his brand of burn-it-all-down populism ahead of the presidential election. Joining me now is Eric Cortellessa, national politics reporter for Time magazine. Eric, thanks for joining me tonight. My first question is the sort of understanding he has about being sidelined in the months leading up to this presidential election, given what you write about the real leadership role he plays in the MAGA movement. You write, unlike other MAGA media personalities who largely seem to follow Trump's lead, Bannon can rightly claim influence over the movement. So what are his prison plans?
Well, I think that Bannon sees his prison sentence as an opportunity to fortify support for him as a martyr for the cause, and he's going to try and capitalize on that as much as he can in the days leading up to him reporting for prison in a Connecticut penitentiary. And he's going to try and lay the groundwork for this anti-establishment crusade that he believes can help deliver the White House for Donald Trump, where he can unrestrained embark on the right-wing nationalist populist agenda that he's promising. I think in prison, Bannon plans to spend his time in the library, following the news voraciously, communicating with his associates, so that he can still have a role in shaping messaging going into the election. Yeah,
he told you think I'm going to come out and be prison ripped? No, I have a lot of work to do. So he's not going to be pumping iron in the yard. He's going to be continuing on with his messaging and missives. Eric, talk to me a little bit about what you saw behind the scenes at Bannon's lair in terms of his consumption of media and his battle his planning for battle, if you will, his strategizing.
Well, I spent some time with Bannon recently during a Saturday morning recording of his podcast at his Capitol Hill townhouse, once known by all as the Breitbart Embassy. And, you know, it's a bit of what you would imagine from the popular understanding of Bannon, the imagination of Bannon. You know, it's cluttered, it's sun-deprived, it's full of all these Bannon curiosities and tchotchkes, including, you know, shrines to MAGA icons like Peter Navarro and even a bust of Bannon himself. And, you know, Bannon is... He watches MSNBC religiously, by the way, and he is really monitoring who he sees as the opposition in the information war in order to build up MAGA as a social movement as much as he can so that it can have the greatest influence throughout the next couple months leading up to when voters will cast ballots. But also, you know, if Trump wins, he wants to see these kinds of ideas be imposed. You know, an hostility to immigration, hostility to free trade, and an aversion to foreign entanglement. So he's really trying to build the infrastructure for a Trump revolution.
What I think is a development, at least if not actually surprising, is the handshake between Republican establishment leadership and the cause of Steve Bannon. I wonder what your impressions were of the work that the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, did today on behalf of Steve Bannon, effectively, you know, distancing Congress from the work of the January 6th committee so as to negate Bannon's contempt of Congress conviction. What is the relationship he has with that kind of wing of the Republican Party, which is by no means moderate, but is not the wing of Marjorie Taylor Greene?
Well, I think it goes to show just how effective Bannon has been at transforming the Republican Party into sort of the political wing of the MAGA movement through War Room, through his allied MAGA media personalities. He's really created a fighting machine, as a top aide to President Trump told me, to go against Republicans who are not in line with Trump. He has built a media ecosystem that can exert pressure, and you have people who work in tandem to coerce Republicans and try to dismantle the old guard Republican establishment. I think this shows just how effective he has been at doing that really since January 6th, when MAGA as a movement has only grown in size and strength.
Well, it's a fascinating read. I guess I'll say I'm glad that Steve Bannon's watching MSNBC. I'm just going to leave that there hanging as if it's a question because I'm not entirely sure. Eric Cortellessa with Time Magazine. Thanks for the great reporting, Eric. It's good to see you.
Thank you.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn. MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.